because Amazon, it makes it think like you have to be bidding this in order to get any sort of placement whatsoever. And that's just not the case. And a lot of times you can still win placements even if you're not within that suggested bid range.
Welcome back, everyone, to That Amazon Ads podcast, where today we've got an exciting topic talking about how to calculate your starting bids, or how to at least figure out and get those starting bids right from the get-go, whether it's launching a new product, launching a new campaign, harvesting new keywords into existing campaigns. We're going to hit it all. Andrew, how you doing today?
Doing good. Excited for this one because how you set those starting bids can really dictate the performance that you get at the onset of any new campaign or any new keyword. So if you do it wrong, you can definitely get bad performance. So excited to share these 5 different ways that we harvest keywords and set starting bids.
All right. Enough with the pleasantries. No more niceties. Let's dive in. Now, before we begin, I would like to cover off on a few announcements. Just kidding. No. Well, one, we put a poll on our podcast YouTube page, and the poll says, what topic should we cover next? At time of recording, it's 20 hours old, this poll. We have 10 votes so far, so I didn't even know you could do polls on YouTube.
Neither did I.
But 10 votes, 3 so far have said more bidding tactics, which was option A. Option B was more keyword strategies, which got another 3 votes. And then the other 2 votes went to option C, which was Excel, Google Sheets tutorials. And then option 4 was more PPC debates, also with 2 votes. So go vote on that. But right now we're going to be diving into more bidding tactics. We're going to be doing all 4 of those with more episodes, but wanted to let you guys know, vote on that to let us know what you want more of. But we are now talking about how to get those bids right from the start, get them right from the start. But Andrew, let's start off with maybe a little bit more generically. Someone has a brand new product, no history. Like they just went to Amazon, they're turning on ads. They say, what should my starting bid be? What are you going to tell them?
What am I going to tell them, or what is Amazon going to tell them they should start their bids with?
I'm just going to say with zero context. I mean, the answer to everything is always depends, right? But with zero context, zero history on this product, what would you do? If you got a product that just went live today with zero history, no data whatsoever, what are you going to do?
Nothing in the account. No other data. No other data from the account at all. No other products. There's only one product in there and it's brand new.
Yep.
In that case, I would likely look at Amazon suggested bids as like a benchmark, as get an idea of what CPCs are. But I would start my bids a lot lower and then inch them up gradually so I could start to see and ultimately get better performance from the start, rather than going with Amazon suggested bids right from the beginning, which are usually very high and inflated to some degree. And if you start with those, you're going to come out the gate firing on all cylinders in those campaigns and likely not going to get very good performance. So I tend, especially with that context, I would probably start low and work my way up from there.
Yeah, I would probably agree with you. Like we started saying and like we started doing on these podcasts, the answer to everything is always depends, but we're going to try to give you guys the answer more sooner on if we can. We'll give you the super short version for those who only want to watch for 6 minutes. So are you ready for the answer? Here's the catch-all. What should your starting bid be? The answer is $1 it is. I'm only half joking with that, but I do think $1 is a good, because that's kind of the average CPC on Amazon. It's probably not a bad, just random starting point. But now let's dive to a lot more details around the specifics. Andrew, we have 5 methods, I should say, to calculate what your starting bid should be. Not necessarily calculate, but at least set the starting bid. Some require calculation. 4 of these are the wrong way. 1 of them is the right way. The right way being ad labs. Just kidding. No, there's probably actually only 1 of these is actually a bad method. The other 4 are pretty decent. But Andrew, why don't you give everyone a quick kind of overview of the 5, and then we'll dive through and tackle them one at a time.
So when you're trying to figure out what your starting bids should be with your new campaigns, when you're launching on Amazon, there are really only 5 ways you can do it. The first one is using Amazon suggested bids. Amazon tells you roughly what the CPCs are going for on certain queries, and you can use that as a starting point. Number two, you can start really low and inch them up. This is a really conservative method. It's really helpful when you don't have any sales data, and it really helps prevent from overspending right from the onset. Number three, we have using the account or similar products within the account average CPCs. This is a little bit more generic way of doing it, but gets you pretty close to the mark of, for your account specifically, what are your averages, and usually a good place to start. Number four, we have converting CPC. This is usually most helpful whenever you're doing keyword harvesting and you're pulling converting search terms from a research-based campaign into a more manually targeted campaign, and you want to get a little more specific. You can use the converting CPC of that search term as a good place to start. You can apply any increases or decreases from there to start your bids. And then number five, we have your idea, Stephen, and we're calling it the Ad Labs method. It is using the destination ad groups Target CPC. I'm excited to hear about this one. I'm going to not take your thunder and let you explain all of that one, but those are the 5 ways you can start your bids on Amazon.
Boom. 5 methods. Let's rewind, back it up, go through these in a little more depth one at a time, starting with number 1, Amazon's suggested bids. All right, Amazon's suggested bids. I have some PTSD on this one after experiencing a software tool that would use Amazon's suggested bid. This is back in 2019, by the way, when I was just getting my start in Amazon, and I've kind of been forever burned now by by automation tools for this reason. I mean, not for this reason. It's for a lot of other reasons than just this one. But this was one of the first experiences, which is that Amazon's suggested bid range can be all over the place. And I have seen this. We talked about this before in another episode, I forget, but I think back then we threw in screenshots of suggested bids getting up to like $100 or some absurd amount.
I think we were looking at like display. I think we were looking at some display ads on that one or something.
It was display, but I've seen it on typical sponsored products too. They can get really crazy high. I think I have some accounts now that bids get up to like $20 for when we average $2 CPCs. So it's a wild range. And then there's also like, should you start from the low end of the suggested bid, the high end, or like whatever Amazon's just saying right in the middle? From my experience, typically those suggested bids are going to be probably higher than what you can afford, especially for like newer products or newer campaigns. So to me, those are great informational elements of telling me how much kind of do I need to pay to get a lot of clicks and traffic. But I'm just going to use it as that just to kind of give me a sense. And then I'm going to pick my own bid after that. But that's pretty much it. What do you think, Andrew? Have you ever used those at all, or do you just completely ignore them?
Yeah, maybe in the very beginning, I was experimenting and figuring out Amazon PPC. Definitely have used them at some point for sure. But very quickly realized that wasn't a really good method and not a good way to start things out. And yeah, like you said, those are usually like the most competitive auction prices that are, from what I can tell, that Amazon is suggesting. So yeah, going on the low end or even, 10, 20% below the low end, you might still even get some placements there, which is interesting because Amazon, it makes it think like you have to be bidding this in order to get any sort of placement whatsoever. And that's just not the case. And a lot of times you can still win placements, even if you're not within that suggested bid range, especially if you're utilizing placement modifiers. You definitely wouldn't want to be using those in tandem with your Amazon suggested bids for sure. So that's been my experience.
Yeah, I think that like you said, starting at the low end might not be a bad idea, and perhaps even a little bit below that, which is actually a pretty good transition into point 2, which is talking about just starting low and inching up from there. So let's jump into that one.
That's right. So number 2 is start your bids low and inch them up from there. So what this method allows you to do is be a little bit more conservative. If you're a little unsure about how a keyword is going to perform for a product, you can start them low and then just inch your way up until they start getting a little bit of visibility. You have a little bit of data coming in that you can interpret, and then you can start to make more informed optimizations. When you don't have any data, it's very difficult to, you're pretty much just guessing. And so the start low, inch up prevents you from just blowing all through your budget right in the beginning and getting really bad performance on the campaign itself in the beginning. It might get you a lot of data right from the beginning, figuring out what your CPCs are, conversion rates, and different things like that. But a much more effective approach, especially if you're working for a client or something like that, and you're launching a new product, it's much better to show really good performance right in the beginning and then gradually continue to ramp things up as you get more data to inform those changes. So that's why I like it. It just gives you good performance. You got good data to work with, and then, you're setting yourself up right from the start. So that's why I like that method personally.
Yep. And I'm going to also go back to something you were mentioning on point 1, Andrew, about the placement modifiers as well. That's important to keep in mind, because if you are going to be increasing for top of search, then you have to consider that whatever your starting bid is going to be, it's going to be increased. So we actually have an example here. This is an account that Andrew and I are co-managing. It's a pretty competitive space. So the average order value for these products are like $50-ish, and the CPCs, Amazon's for one keyword, just a random keyword with decent volume in this campaign, the suggested range is from $4.25 all the way up to $8.21. Very, very expensive. We are bidding $3.50. So we're quite a bit below the low end of that range. And yet on that term, we're still getting pretty good visibility. I'm just looking at the last 2 weeks. We have 8% top of search impression share, 50% AcoS, which is the target, and got 46 clicks there on this one keyword. Now the CPCs on that keyword are $6.18. So the actualized CPC is a lot closer to what Amazon's suggested bid is, coming in at their actual suggested bid is $6.09. So we're right around the actual suggested bid, but our bid has been lowered to $3.50. But we're increasing it by another, I don't know what that is, 50% or so to get up to top of search. And, a combination, we're actually probably increasing by more than that for top of search specifically. But between all of our placements, this keyword's kind of actualizing around a $6 CPC bid. So point being, it's better to start with your bids below the low end of the suggested bid range, and then, throw a little increase for top of search. And you can start inching up from there until you start getting some visibility. But like Andrew said, the main goal here is you are a little bit more, your prioritization is just, I don't want to go broke within the first month of advertising. I would rather have a slower start to my sales in order to make sure that I'm, just not losing a ton of money.
Yep, absolutely. Great way to put it. Yeah, I don't really have anything else on start low, inch up. Do you?
It's straightforward. Yeah. Nope. Let's go into method number 3. Let's go. All right. Method number 3, using the account average CPC. This is actually pretty good metric. This is actually what I used most of the time when getting going. And average CPC, technically we should kind of say what's the account average target CPC is kind of maybe a little bit more accurate. Sure. But assuming your AcoS is good, your current CPC is the target CPC. So if your account is getting a 30% AcoS with a $1 CPC, that $1 bid is probably a good starting point. Again, maybe you go a little bit lower, 80 cents, assuming that you're going to be having some increases for top of search or rest of search. Then, and what this is basically doing is just saying, on average, this is what we can typically afford. So it's a good idea for if you're adding a new keyword or launching a new product or starting a new campaign. That's just a all around, until you can get more data, let's just start with the average. That's rules of averages are always a safe bet.
Yeah, I've certainly used this method before, and it doesn't produce bad results by any means. You could also look, like if you're starting with a new product and you have other products that are similar or advertising on similar keywords, you can also use the averages from those as a good indicator as well. And even with this, you can kind of blend these different methods as well. Like if you could just take your average CPCs, and this is probably, if I remember correctly, kind of what I did. I was looking at average CPCs, and then I would kind of reduce a little bit from there, depending on the situation. So like, let's say I have a cheaper product than what I'm normally selling. You got to take some context into account here. If it's a cheaper product than what I'm normally selling, I might be a little more conservative with my bids, because those auctions are probably going to be a little bit cheaper and not as expensive as some of the higher AOV items searches are and things like that. Or if it's a higher price product, you got to take that into account as well. So it's important to take that context. If you're just looking at the overall account average, there's a lot of potential nuance within that. But blended out, it still gives you the average and has always, been a good place to start for me.
Yep. And I think something else that a lot of sellers will do for, let's say the product has a sales history, but it has never been promoted in ads before. What a lot of people will do is they'll kind of do a pseudo version of the revenue per click thing, the RPC method. But the way in which they do it is they look at the unit session percentage within Seller Central, or if you're in Vendor Central, you'd have to calculate that as units divided by glance views. And then you multiply that by your average order value, or basically just the sales price of the product. And that will essentially give you the sales per session, which is pretty close proxy to sales per click, revenue per click. And then you would just multiply that by your target AcoS or your product margin, and there you go. And so you can start with that as well. So you can do that if the product has any history before in advertising and it's just a new campaign or new keyword for that. You can use that product's advertising data to calculate that same thing. Or if the AcoS has been good, just use what the current CPC has been for that product or for the account at large if you're not too worried about individual product performance, because your products all perform relatively similarly. So anything else to add to point 3, Andrew?
Nothing further to add on this one. I think that's a great point. If that product does have some total sales data, being able to use that as a potential starting point for your ad campaigns, that's awesome. I love that. Let's move on to number 4, converting CPC. All right, Steven. So this one I see most prevalently in keyword harvesting. So let's say you have an auto campaign and a manual campaign. You've seen a bunch of stuff converting in your auto. You want to pull it over into your manual. You got to have a starting bid for that. Most people, what they'll do, and most softwares, this is kind of a traditional setting within them that you can use, is you can essentially set the bid based on whatever that search term's converting CPC was. So whatever the CPC was on that converting term that you're harvesting is. And then usually, depending, if it's coming from like an auto campaign, perhaps your bids are a lot lower in those than they would be in, say, an exact match campaign. Usually what they'll do is they'll take that converting CPC and multiply it by some sort of percent increase to account for a little bit more competitive bidding on more manual match types. And so they'll usually do like a 10, 20% increase from that converting CPC when they move it into their exact match. But you're telling me that this doesn't work, and I'm curious to hear your thoughts as to why.
I didn't say that yet. I'm about to. Well, yeah. So typically it's the most popular method where the search term, you're going through the search term reports. It's like, oh, this thing met my harvesting criteria, had 10 sales, and the AcoS was good. So it converted at a 50-cent CPC. I'm just going to try to keep the flow going and pull this over into my exact match campaign with a 50-cent bid, and also into my phrase match campaign. And you can apply, like Andrew was saying, I'm just recapping, you can apply either a percentage increase or decrease, or sometimes a dollar amount increase or decrease. So they might say, keep the same exact CPC for exact. Going into phrase, I'm going to do 10% less than the CPC, and going into broad, I'm going to do 20% less. So you're going to scale it down as you're anticipating maybe not as good conversion rates. So that's what people do. Here's why I think it doesn't work, for 2 reasons. Number 1, kind of comes out back to a harvesting issue, which we did an episode on harvesting keywords. Go check that one out if you want to learn more. But I think a big mistake that a lot of people do is they do not like to harvest high AcoS keywords, because they think that high AcoS means the keyword itself is bad or not relevant, which isn't always the case. In fact, it's rarely the case. Maybe 5% of the time is it the case, perhaps even less. Most of the time, the issue with high AcoS is that, especially when the keywords are relevant, the only issue then is that the CPC to the conversion rate ratio is off. You have been essentially overbidding, overspending that CPC. Especially if this is in an auto campaign. I had this example, I posted this on LinkedIn yesterday. I had an auto campaign where the close, it was like the close match target had an average $2 CPC, and that was great. We were hitting the target AcoS. It was beautiful. But one search term in particular, within that auto targeting, like, match type, when we looked at the search term reports, had like 100% AcoS with a $2 CPC. So most people would like negate that term or just not harvest it. And that's going to do, either of those solutions is going to hurt you, because if you negate it, well, now you're losing the sales that you were generating on it. If you choose not to harvest it, then you're going to continue spending inefficiently on it because you're not able to control the bid specifically for that when it's part of either an auto match type or a broad match type. The solution is to harvest that keyword over into an exact match campaign so that you can calculate the bid appropriately. Turns out that search term in particular was relevant. You would only negate it if it was irrelevant, and it was only worth 80 cents. So we moved it over into the exact match campaign, now targeting an 80-cent CPC. We're hitting that CPC, not getting as many sales as before, but at least the sales that we are getting is profitable. And my opinion is that a few sales that are profitable for you is better than either of the other two conditions, which is 0 sales because you negated it, or a lot of sales that you're losing money on because you're not properly harvesting these or calculating the bids or etc. So to try to sum up everything that I just said, the mistake when people are using the converting search term CPC is if I just harvested that converting search term at the CPC that it was at, the AcoS was too high at that CPC. So I'm running into trouble there. I'm going to convert it over, now have an exact match keyword that's high AcoS. And then what other people will sometimes do is just not harvest it because they have a filter for high AcoS that they're not going to, harvest terms with higher AcoS. And that's a mistake as well. So we do think you should be harvesting terms that have sales, provided that there's enough volume behind that search term for you to optimize it with enough clicks. You should be harvesting it. If the AcoS is high, our bidding methods will fix that. We'll get the bids calibrated. But that's reason number one why I don't think that converting CPC is the best, because it doesn't really fix those high AcoS scenarios, either because you are not harvesting them or you're harvesting them with too high CPCs. Second reason why it doesn't work is because sometimes you get a 2-cent click for whatever reason. Like if you just download a search term report, find all your keywords with at least one sale, and then sort in ascending order by like CPC, and you'll see sometimes you get insanely low cheap clicks. And that could be because you got that click like at 11:59 p.m. right when everybody's running out of budget, and you were kind of like the only bidder in that minute that got the click and got the sale, and you got a stupid cheap CPC. And if you just harvested over that, you're going to be at a 2-cent bid. And then it can take you, if your strategy is to increase bids by 10%, once a week. Well, first of all, it's never going to increase from 2 cents, because as long as you're increasing by 10%, it's always going to increase to 2.2, and then it's always going to round down to 2 cents. And then you will never be able to increase unless if you have logic built into your increase method where it's like increase by at least 10%. And if the bid increase is less than a penny, resolve to a 1 penny increase. But even then, that will take you weeks, perhaps months, to inch up that CPC to a place where you're getting visibility. So that's why I'm not a fan.
Makes total sense. I figured that's what you were going to say, at least the second one. I wasn't expecting that first one. But yeah, the bid and the CPC are not the same thing, right? You could be bidding 50 cents or 75 cents in your auto campaign, get these one-off sales for 2 cents, and then you're trying to harvest it from there using that CPC as a starting point. You're going to have to crank that up quite a bit in order to get any visibility. So yeah, just keep in mind that bid and CPC are not the same thing. And that's why it's not going to work for converting CPC all the time.
Yeah, let me actually see if I can find an example real quick. We'll pause this for a second, and I'll see if I can find some real case examples of what I just described. Okay, here we go. Pulling up just a random account of mine, looking at the last 30 days, search terms. I have converting search terms with $0 CPCs. So explain that one, Andrew. Well, actually, it says that it says I have 0 clicks, but 1 order. So I don't know what's
I
going
have
on
seen
there.
that.
Yeah. So so if I was harvesting these, Amazon would give me an error saying 2 cents is the lowest bid that you can do. I have several of those, and then looks like for the most part on this account in particular, most of my cheap CPCs are coming in at 10 cents. But even then, these are all like overall, I mean, a lot of them are 1 click, 1 sale scenarios, really cheap clicks. But for this account, we average $1.50. So to start at like 10 cents to work your way up to basically back to what you should be at would take weeks or months. So that's why I think the best method of harvesting search terms, particularly in the keyword harvesting process, if it's a brand new product launch, like we said, go back to method 3 and use the sales data from Seller Central to give you a good idea of that starting bid. But particularly when harvesting keywords and bringing these into new campaigns, the proper method will be to use a combination of the search terms data itself, if that's enough to calculate the bid, and if not, to use the destination ad group's target CPC. So let's talk more about that in method number 5. So if you are a long-term follower of the podcast, or if you're a masterclass student, then you are very familiar with our bidding methodologies, the 4 scenarios for which you're going to be calculating bids. You know that the revenue per click method comes in particularly helpful in 2 scenarios, which is optimizing bids on high AcoS keywords, as well as keywords with high spend and no sales. In the scenario of keyword harvesting, you're very likely not going to be harvesting search terms with high spend and no sales, so we can leave that one out of it and just do the high AcoS. If it is a high AcoS keyword, even if it has 1 click and 1 sale, and you might say that's not enough click confidence. Well, if the AcoS is too high, it is enough click confidence. Because if you're already overshooting the target with just 1 click and assuming 100% conversion rate, you're way over. So we can certainly start optimizing that. But very simply put, any search terms that you harvest over, if they are above your target AcoS, you will use the revenue per click method. Got a whole episode dedicated just to that, so go check it out. But that will that's going to be the starting bid for that search term. So you harvest it over to a keyword. You can apply further multipliers if you want. You can say, like, for my exact match, I'm going to go exactly with what the revenue per click output is. For phrase and broad, maybe I'll do what that is, minus 10%, minus 20%. You can like kind of further fine tune it and adapt it. But that's just a very straightforward, like when the search term itself has a lot of data, if it has, hundreds of clicks and a bunch of sales, that's enough data for us to calculate it. You could argue too that if it is at the proper current, if it's hitting the current target AcoS, then you could just use the current CPC. But yeah, I mean, I don't want to get too sidetracked with it. So Andrew, now let's say, what about the other items that are kind of just like, lower data, not high AcoS? We're just going to kind of stick them over there, and we're just generally looking for a better approach to what those bids should be. What's the solution there?
Yeah. So what we've found is that in order to best set your bids initially when adding them to new campaigns, we use the target CPC of the destination ad group. So where that keyword is going, we're going to look at the target CPC for that. Now, the reason why we're going to do that is because that campaign already has a lot more data within it for that product and relevant queries that we're going to be delivering on. And we can use that data to better inform what those bids need to be and how that product is performing in those other queries by using that destination's ad group data. So with this, I think one important thing to keep in mind is these campaigns also have placement modifiers. We've been talking about this. It's important that you factor those placement modifications in as well. So this isn't just to say that you take the overarching target CPC and that's your starting bid. We would also want to look at what those placement modifications are on that campaign. So what you would need to do is look at both of those factors, figure out what that percentage decrease needs to be, what your base bids needs to be set to based on what those multipliers are to get you up to that target CPC in those best performing placements.
Yeah, that does get a bit complicated if you think about it.
Totally.
Like, you've got your best-selling tennis racket product, and you've got that auto campaign. It's going on. It's pulling in a whole bunch of good keywords, or it's discovering a whole slew of new search terms that are generating a lot of sales. Some of them have high AcoS. Calibrate that bid, stick it in the new one. Some of them have lower AcoS. We could probably push a bit more, but we're just going to start them off at the general kind of best CPC for the ad group where it's going. And the reason why we are going to be using the ad groups data is because it's going into a campaign with particular campaign placements. The placement settings in that destination campaign are going to be different from the placements in the source campaign. And also, if you're doing like an exact match ad group, you're likely going to have a lot more dialed in information at the ad group level compared to the source kind of research campaigns. So it's very likely, if you have a good campaign structure, as you should, watch our episode on campaign structure if you haven't. We also have to redo that structure episode. That was episode 13, and was it 13? No, maybe even earlier than that. We got to redo the structure episode. Yeah, but you're putting these keywords into campaigns that have hopefully been optimized over time, over the past several weeks and months and years that you've been running them, and you've really started to dial in the performance there and the placement settings. And so the best approach, in our opinion, is to use the Target CPC, factoring in the campaign placements for that campaign, and that's what the search term is going to be, the new keyword bid's going to be determined from. This is not yet in Ad Labs because we don't yet have keyword harvesting in Ad Labs, but we are actively working on it, and this is a big part of what we think is going to make an extremely efficient keyword harvesting thing. So we are recording this in May 17th. I believe this should be released by June. So if you're in June listening to this, 2024, by the way, for anyone in 2025 listening to this, June 2024, this should be active. But quick side note for those who are still using bulk sheets, which is our first love and was the inspiration for Ad Labs in the first place. With bulk sheets, the way in which you can accomplish this is when you are optimizing your bids and doing the placement settings like we've told you, you should calculate the ad group default bid. That would actually be a huge help. So while you're calculating all of your bids for all of your products and keyword targets on the bulk sheet, you can also include the ad groups, calculate the CPCs with the same methods we've told you for the ad groups themselves. And then when you're harvesting over these terms, you can actually leave the starting bid column blank, and it will just inherit the ad group default bid. So you are therefore accomplishing this solution here of achieving the destination ad group Target CPC, because that ad group default bid should hopefully, when you calculated that, have factored in the placement settings. So you can harvest the term on your bulk sheets, leave the bid blank for these new keywords, and they will be set to the destination ad group default bid, which should accomplish the Target CPC after placements are accounted for.
Boom. Yeah, that's a good one. That's genius. I don't know if people are doing that all the time, but that's certainly one way to do it. So
I literally thought of that just now.
You told me that yesterday.
I know.
I had to call that
a stroke of genius on the air.
Yeah.
I believe that covers it. I believe that should hopefully answer any questions that people have around what should my starting bids be. I think probably when that question is asked, it's usually in terms of like a product launch, but still I think keyword harvesting is where you're going to come into this more frequently. The short answer now at the end of the episode is if it's a brand new product launch, you can just maybe try the $1 Bob strategy if you have no data until you can get some data, or start low and inch up. Those are kind of my two, in summary, preferred methods for zero data scenarios. Andrew?
Yeah, totally.
Closing thoughts? Sum it up?
I think this is a good episode for people to learn a little bit about how to set those bids, but I got nothing else to add on this. Go back and listen to those 5, pick which one you're going to do, and start adding keywords like this.
And like, subscribe. If you're an audio-only listener, please leave us reviews on Apple Podcasts and Spotify Podcasts. We're craving those reviews. If you're on YouTube, you know what to do. Comment, like, subscribe. We love you guys, and we'll talk to you next week on That Amazon Ads Podcast.